Hello, this is Reverend Kevin Knox, your host for the Pastors Academy podcast. Due to the pandemic, we're now editing our pastoral interviews for shorter segments for easier listening. After all, since you're spending less time in the car, it's harder to listen to a full episode. For the next several clips, we have Pastor Don Meadows. He has been in the ministry for nearly 20 years and has pastored churches in both Florida and Louisiana. Don has also acted as a consultant for churches who are developing and launching community ministries. He is presently the senior pastor at Morriston Baptist Church. He and his wife, Tammy, reside in north central Florida. They have 3 adult children and 2 lovely grandchildren. So, Don, I want to thank you again for being a part of our podcast today. You had some great experience in your ministry. Can you tell me a little bit about how you became a minister?
Sure, Kevin. Thanks for inviting me and being a part of this Pastors Academy. Well, I've been in ministry for nearly 20 years, and the way that it happened is I was saved kind of late in life, according to stats. I was about 28. My salvation experience is kind of surreal. I was raised in church. My grandfather was with a preacher, and my uncle was a preacher. You know, some of that took, some of it didn't.
I understand.
So when I got older, you know, in my teenage years, as is the case with many, I've wandered away from the church, did not have a saving knowledge of Christ then, kind of walked away, did my own thing, got married, had 3 kids, started a business. And it was, I was 28 years old when decisions I had made in my life came back to haunt me and completely tore up my life. Trust was gone. I faced losing my business, my family, my home, everything I had. And I was actually traveling down the interstate in my pickup truck and pulled over on the side of the road in a broken state of heart and mind. And actually this was my prayer. God, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm yours. And that was a Wednesday. And Wednesday, September 20th, I believe, 1998. And I come home and I told my wife, who was already a believer and had wanted me to go to church. I said, okay, we're going. I just got saved. Let's pack up and head to church. So that was my salvation experience. God healed my life, healed my family, healed me.
Wow.
In the process, emotionally and in my soul, and habits and things like transform my life. Romans 12, 1 and 2 is my heart's passage that he transformed my life. So a couple of years into it, probably around 2000, I began to feel the call to preach or to call into vocational ministry. And my pastor at the time really let me experiment with the different things, men's ministry, music ministry. It allowed me just to get my feet wet and just to seek out God's call on my life. At the same time, instructing me and guiding me and helping me. Well, I knew that God was calling me to preach, so I went through some training there at my home church with my pastor and some mentoring. And God called us God's call on my life that we knew, my wife and I knew it was time to go to Bible college and seminary for my equipping for the ministry. So we did that. And for the last 15 years, it's been a pretty good ride. And it's been a lot of ups and downs, but I never have doubted for too long. That God,
clarify that.
God, that's right. I had to walk that back a minute. So I've never doubted for too long that God hadn't called me into the ministry. But it's been, my wife is a great pastor's wife. She's a great wife. And so my kids are grown and have 2 grandkids, but I've served only a couple churches and a couple different capacities, but it's been a good ride.
So I understand that you went in the ministry. Right. She ended up being with you when you decided to go in the ministry. That's a whole different ball of wax. Sometimes wives don't sign up for that. So I didn't think they did. So
yeah, but she was made for it. And she didn't marry a preacher. She married a member of the Country Music Association of Central Florida. That's who she married. I played music in bars.
Big difference.
Yeah. Yep. But anyway, she's been a trooper. She's followed the Lord and followed me. She's a great woman.
Sweet. It's a good story. I appreciate that. So I understand you recently moved and relocated to another church. That begs the question that a lot of us have is, how do you know when it's time to move on? Do you have any advice on that?
Man, that's a question I have struggled with time and time again, and I don't think it's anything new to the pastoral ministry or ministry leadership in any regard. I think God has placed it within my heart always to be a person of vision, and it's very easy for me to understand what needs to be done, and in many cases have the details in my heart in which to live it out. But I had to answer that question, which I wrestled with a long time, probably a year and a half, 2 years. Do I have the energy to pull that off here? Is God still giving me the energy to do the hard work in the current church? And I think that's probably the question, because if you're a person of vision, I mean, sometimes it comes naturally. The question then comes, okay, where do you live out that vision? Where has God given you the passion to live it out? Who has he called you to? Where has he called you? We all know that we're called, number one, to follow Christ. That's our number one calling. And then our calling to ministry. But to who and where? I think that's the big question. And to me, in my experience, I've answered that question with energy. So my last church I served for 13 years, and about 11 and a half years into it, God began to change my heart. And when I thought about what needed to be done, I really just didn't want to do it. I just didn't have the drive, didn't have the passion to get back up again and to do the hard work and to muster up the emotional intelligence and emotional energy it would take to go this next step. So through talking with seasoned pastors and mentors and just actually, just bringing it before the Lord, I discovered that God was changing my heart. It was time to look and to seek his heart for the next assignment. Everything was good where I was, no problems. It still is a great church, great people, love them. In fact, several families have made me promise to come back and do funerals when they need it, not if. I guess we're all going.
Not anytime soon, but come on back.
That's right. So really became a pastor of the community, and by the grace of God. And it's just a great church. But there comes a time, I believe, when God begins to change a pastor or a ministry leader's heart, where no matter how good it is, it's still bad because there's no energy, there's no joy. I began to think about other possibilities, and other possibilities actually brought me a lot of energy, other roles. So I began in our denomination, each church is autonomous, and each pastor can go from another church. He can say, okay, God's done with me and I can move. And I don't know how other denominations work. I don't have any experience there, but each church can hire or release ministry leaders. So through networking, was looking and actually sent my resume to this new place that I've only been at 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
And it was a process of about 6 months between the time we first began to talk and to the time I actually got into the field about 8 weeks ago. So I think in my experience, it's just energy. What has God given you the energy to do, and where is he giving you the energy to do it at and with?
Okay, that's a good sign. I can understand that. A lot that we're called to depends upon our energy and everything like that. So that's a good takeaway. During this whole process, part of the struggle was, in my heart, God's given me a heart for vision and a heart for strategy. So I started to even think maybe it may be time for an executive pastor position somewhere, to give up the preaching and to go into a ministry aspect where I could spend most of my time developing leaders, developing ministry, and allowing the pastor freedom to do what he feel called to do, cast vision and preach. Even pursue that a little bit. But in the meantime, probably at the beginning of the summer, midsummer last year, began to read Jeremiah. And that's where God called me into the ministry. That's Jeremiah's call. Okay.
But God used it. Thank God it's Jeremiah's call, not mine. But he used it to call me into the ministry. And chapter 1, I forgot what verse, but when God told Jeremiah, I have put my words in your mouth. God reminded me He called me to preach. So once I settled that, what God had called me to do and what the next step was and what area, then I had the peace and the direction, and things just started seeming to open up as I settled that in my heart. I believe that wrestling's good.
Yeah. I think Jacob wrestled quite a bit with the angel, didn't he? So
that's right. And his walk was different.
That's true. And yours is different too now, too, I'm sure.
That's right.
That's it for today's episode. Join us tomorrow as Pastor Don shares his experience of being portrayed by his associate pastor. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode. See you tomorrow.